Hello and welcome everyone. We're really excited to have everyone here today for our weekly OCI deep dive. I'm Maria Philip, Product Marketing Manager with the OCI Go-to-Market team. And today we're joined by presenters Marcus Doeringer and Austine Ouma, who are both data Modernise specialists on the Oracle EMEA Data Platform Specialist team. We also have Amalraj Putensira, who will handle the Q&A questions. And he's also data Modernise specialist on the Oracle EMEA Data Platform Specialist team. Feel free to raise any questions in the Q&A box at any time during the webinar. The topic of today's webinar is Accelerate Your Data Migration into Oracle Autonomous Database. Our presenters will share how you can easily migrate your data into the Oracle Autonomous Database. They will teach you how to use the data load feature on the OCI Console, how to use SQL Developer Data Import Wizard to load data from many sources, and how to use OCI Database Migration for Oracle databases, as well as offline and online methods. So that's enough for me. Marcus and Austine, please go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. Hello and welcome everybody to today's session, Accelerate Your Data Migration into the Oracle Autonomous Database. My name is Marcus and I'm here today with my colleagues Austine and Amalraj, and we are part of the EMEA Data Modernise Specialists team. So let's have a look at today's agenda and the topics we will cover. So first we will give a general overview about the migration to Autonomous Database, and then we will directly jump over to the public cloud, to OCI, and show you three different scenarios, from a simple data load with OCI Console data load, then a data bump import with SQL Developer, and finally also how to set up online migrations with OCI Database Migration. Now, before we jump into the migration topic, let's have a short summary about what Oracle Autonomous Database is. So Autonomous Database is a fully automated database service with built-in machine learning, and it provides automated tuning, scaling, and also patching. It's built on Oracle Exadata, and it delivers the highest performance, availability, and also security. And we have different deployment models of Autonomous. So we offer it, of course, in the public cloud in OCI. There we have the Autonomous Database Serverless and Autonomous Database Dedicated. But we also offer Autonomous Database in the customer data center as Autonomous Cloud at Customer, where we basically ship an Exadata to the customer data center, but also with dedicated region Cloud at Customer, which is more or less a complete OCI infrastructure at the customer data center. Now, when you provision an autonomous database, this is really easy, and you just need a few parameters like the number of CPUs, how many storage you would like to have. And within a few minutes, you have your first autonomous database running and have access to all these cool new features and functionality. And that's probably fine if you start from scratch or develop a new application, but most of the time you already have some existing data or existing databases that you want to load or migrate into the autonomous database. So when we look at cloud migration or migration solutions in general, we have lots of different tools how we can migrate databases or data into autonomous or into databases in general. So you probably have heard them before or are familiar with them. We can use Recovery Manager, we can use PDB, Unplug, Plug, Remote Cloning, Data Guard, and also our new cloud migration tools like Zero Downtime Migration or OCI Database Migration. But before we start with a migration, we normally classify a migration between a physical migration and a logical migration. So what is the difference between these two? And maybe let's step back from the database for now. And let's say we have a text file sitting on a hard disk, and we want to migrate this file to another hard disk. So when we do a physical migration, we just simply copy the file over to the new hard disk. So we end up with the same file on the new hard disk, and this is a physical migration where we really do a blockwise copy. Now, in a logical migration, we would not copy the file. We would just create a new file on the new hard disk. And this can also be, you see, it has a new name, it has a new extension, it can even be for a different program. And then we just mark the text that we want to copy, and we really copy that text into this new document. And of course, we also don't need to copy the full text. We just can only copy specific text out of this document. So this is a logical migration. We really bring out the data and then we copy or we paste it and load it into the new document. And the same applies for databases. So if we have a database, in this case 12.2 running on Linux, we just copy the data files to the target system. We start the database, we end up with the same database system like we had on source. That's a physical migration. Whereas in a logical migration, again, we have our 12.2 database on Linux here again. In that case, we spin up a new target system. This is an autonomous database running already on 19C. And then we export the data and we import and load the data into autonomous database. And normally it depends on lots of different things if we want to go with a physical migration and a logical migration. But when we are talking about migrating to autonomous, there's a simple rule, and that is if the target or when the target is an autonomous database, we are always doing a logical migration. And the reason for that is how the service is built, because in autonomous, we don't have access to the underlying operating system. And we don't have access to the underlying container database. So we can't just simply copy over data files, or we can't use recovery manager to do a restore on the autonomous database. We really have to extract the data and then load the data into the autonomous database. So that means when our target is an autonomous database, we also need to find a tool or a migration method that supports logical migration, which means we can't use things like recovery manager or PDB unplug plug, for example. We also can't use data guard to set up a data guard on CDB level. We really need a tool that supports logical migration like Databump, SQL Developer, or ZDM and DMS. So the key thing is, we talked about that we are not migrating databases, we are really migrating data. We have to extract the data and then load the data. And for that, we have two different ways of doing that. The first one is we can do it directly. So for example, if you already have your data in a file that you really want to load into autonomous database, or you can also think of using database links from autonomous to the source database and then pulling the data directly into autonomous database. But with bigger databases and with bigger data, what we normally use is a staging area, and this is OCI object storage. So we extract the data from the source, we upload it to OCI object storage, and from the object storage, we load it into autonomous database. One important thing that I also want to mention here is the Cloud Pre-Migration Advisor tool, or CPAD. This tool it's a small little Java program that is available for download under this support node here. And this program you can basically run on your source database. And what it does, it scans your source database. There are a lot of checks that the tool is doing. And it shows you potential issues when migrating the database to autonomous database. So for example, here is one of the checks that the tool is executing. And in that database, I created a table with an ORD image column, a multimedia object type column. And the tool basically says you have that table in your source database, and multimedia object types cannot be used in autonomous database. So there will be a failure if you want to, or an error when you try to migrate this table to autonomous. If you want to learn more, and especially how to plan a migration to autonomous and what things you need to consider when preparing, like CPAD I've shown you before, how to execute the migration, what tools are available, and finally how to validate, we have a brand new website out there on the oracle.com/database/cloud migration that has lots of information about all these steps. Okay, with that, I would like to hand over now to my colleague Austine that will show you a demo of the OCI Console data load and also the SQL Developer data import wizard.
Hi everyone, my name is Austine, and I'll be taking you through the process of loading data into an autonomous database using the data load feature. And then another demo that I'm going to show is how to use SQL Developer data pump import wizard to load data into an autonomous database. So for the first demo, which is to use the data load feature, the assumption is that I already have a CSV file, for example, that I'm going to load into this autonomous database. So on my screen, you can see an autonomous database is already running. I'm calling it SQLT. And I already have a CSV file system, a CSV file in my local machine that I'm going to be loading into this autonomous database. To do that, all I need to do is to click on database actions and then click on data load. Data load will open the data load feature pane. And in there, you will be asked a couple of questions. So for example, you can see what do you want to do with your data and where is your data. So under what do you want to do with your data, you basically just tell the autonomous database what you want to do. So you can either load data from a local file, which is what we are going to be doing in this demo, or you can link data to an existing database somewhere through database links. So you will be asked to pick a certain database wherever the information is coming from. Note that when you click on link data, you cannot pick a local file. So this has to be linked to a database somewhere. Or you can feed data periodically from your cloud storage wherever they exist, okay? So in your bucket or whatever. For this demo, we are going to be loading data, and we are loading data directly from my local file. So as I mentioned, I have a CSV file in my local machine. So I click on local file, and all I do is click on next, okay? So what I'm going to do here is to select files, and then on my local file, it's going to ask me where my file is. Remember, I mentioned I have a CSV file. So this is the file that I'm going to load into the autonomous database. I click on open, and the file is loaded. Remember, the file is loaded, but it is not yet run on the autonomous database, okay? So all I need to do is to click on start to run the job. But before I do that, let me take you to the actions page here, the 3 buttons, just to show you what you can do before you run the data load job. So under settings, you'll be able to see that what we are doing in this instance is to create a table. So you see we have a table here, and what we are doing is to create a table. You can create a table and enter data, insert into an existing table, or replace the data into an existing table, or you can even choose to drop and create another table as well as merge. In here, you see the name of the table, which if you noted, actually takes after the name of the CSV file. But just to show you that we can manipulate this before, entering, running that job, we can change the name of the table. So say, for example, I can edit it to data load. Let me just call it channels data load. So this is just to show you that before you load the data as is from the CSV file, you can play around with the table name and edit it. And just like you can do that, you can also do the same with your columns. So you can see that under the source column here, you're not able to edit anything. However, for the target column inside the autonomous database, you're able to change that. You can also change your data types, length, precision, scales, and things like that. So again, just like we did with the table, let's just show how to change one column. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to call this channel ID and call it data load, just an example, Okay. And then something else you need to see is under preview, you'll be able to see how your file looks like in the CSV. And then this is how it will look like in the autonomous database table after the job has been run, okay? Under table, we have nothing because the table does not yet exist. This is because we've not yet run the job. If you want to see the SQL statement that will be run to execute this job, then this is where you get it. And if you not, under create table, you can see that the table name has changed from channels to channels_data load. And then insert into the first column has changed from channel_ID to channel_data load. So this was just to show you that you are able to, manipulate data before you run the data load job. Under job report here, we have nothing because we've not yet run the job. And this is what we are going to do next. So let me just close this and then click on start to run the job. It asks me, do you wish to run the data load job? And I just say yes. So the job will be run, and you can see that in green we have complete, which basically tells us that the job has been run. But before I run away, let me just look at, let me go back to the settings page that we just looked at. And you can see that this time the table was created, and this is the name of the table. Remember, we had edited this. And then now we have the source and target all grayed out because the table has already been created. If you go to tables at this point, you can now see the table the way it looks like in the Autonomous DB. Remember, we didn't have a table before the job was created. You can also see the job report now because we've already run the job. And of special note is that 5 rows were processed successfully, none was rejected. It was a create table job and it ran in 1 second. If in case you need to see the DDL, the SQL statement that you need to create this table, then all you need to do is to click on data definition. And then in data definition, you'll be able to see the DDL that you'd be able to use to create this table, which is what you have on your screen. So there you go, very fast. That's how you use the data load function or the data load feature in Autonomous Database to load data from files in your local file system. Could be CSVs, could be Excel, XLS, and other data types for that matter. So with that done, the next thing that I would like to show you is how to load data into the Autonomous Database using SQL Developer. Okay, we have people who enjoy using SQL Developer, they love SQL Developer, and I will just show you how to use the data pump wizard, okay, in SQL Developer to load data into an Autonomous Database. So for that purpose, we are still going to be using this same database that we had picked on earlier, so I can just close the data load feature. Okay, we are still going to be loading data into this SQL database. And for us to do that, there are a couple of things that we need to have in place. So I'm already assuming that we had taken an export from a source database somewhere, and that dump file has already been stored into the object storage in OCI. So let me just show you where I have my buckets. So I go to buckets here, and under buckets, I have a storage bucket already created. The bucket name is called expdmp, so export dump. Okay, and inside expdmp, I already have my dump file loaded. Okay, so this is just one assumption. So this is the dump file that I'm going to be loading into the into the Autonomous Database that I just showed you. However, for me to do that, I need to create a pre-authenticated request for this object. Okay, and this is what is going to be used on SQL Developer to access this dump file on OCI. So what I need to do is to click on these 3 buttons here, click on pre-authenticated request, select only the object, not the entire bucket, okay? And then you can play around with the access type in terms of read writes and read and writes. And, I'll just leave this as read because all we need to do is to read that dump file. And then I just click on create pre-authenticated request. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to copy this URL. This is the URL that you will need to feed into SQL Developer for you to be able to access that dump file using SQL Developer. So I just click on copy and I paste it on some notepad somewhere. Okay, so that is done. That is the first thing that I need to do. The next thing that I need to do is to create a credential within the Autonomous Database. Okay, this is what the Autonomous Database will use through SQL Developer to access the dump file in object storage. But before I can do that, what I need to do is to create an auth token. The auth token is what is going to be used as the password for the credential that I just mentioned. Okay, so as the user who is going to be running the import job, I click on my profile. Okay, there you go. And in my profile here, what I do is I click on my profile. And then I scroll down to, in my profile, I scroll down to auth tokens, okay, under resources. So you can see under resources here, I click on auth tokens. And then I just click on generate token. I give it a name, say for example, import token, okay. And then I just click on generate. What I need to do here is to copy that token, paste it in a notepad somewhere, and I will provide this as the password to my ADB credential that will be used to access that dump file in OCI. Okay, so I've already copied that. With that in mind, I think I have every prerequisite necessary for me to be able to go to SQL Developer. Okay, so let me just close that. And what I do next is to go to SQL Developer. Let me load my SQL Developer screen. Here you can see I already have a connection to the database. You can see that this is the database that we created on OCI, SQL DB. This is where I'll be doing my import. So what I need to do is to connect into my SQL DB. Okay, so that is loading. And as that loads, the other thing that I need to show you is that you need the DBA pen, okay? The DBA pen will normally have a lot of tasks that DBAs are familiar with, things that you can use to monitor and manage your database. So if you do not have your DBA pen, as I don't on my SQL developer page, what I need to do is to just click on view here and then click on DBA, okay? And then DBA pen will come in. Just before I do that, let me just show you the data load feature that the data load, a result of the data load, job that we ran earlier. So under tables, you can see we have our table name. Remember, we had renamed it to data load. You can see the name of the table here. If you expand this, you'll be able to see the, the columns that we were playing around with, and you can see we changed one from channel ID to data load. And if you click on data, you are able to see the data as we saw in the OCI console. But that's just to show you that the data load worked in OCI, and we are able to see the same on SQL Developer. For this scenario, we are going to be doing data pump. So I just click on, so you can see the DBA pen came. And all I need to do is to expand this. And as I mentioned, you can see a lot of tasks, things that DBAs can use to monitor and manage the database, things to do with DB configurations, RMAN backups, tuning, so on and so forth. We're interested in data pump. All I need to do is to, run the data pump import job. But before I get there, I need to create the ADB credential. Remember, I mentioned that we need to create an ADB credential. For me to do that, all I need to do is to run this statement, okay? So using the DBMS cloud package, we are going to run the create credential procedure, and we are going to offer the credential name. This can be whatever you want. We are going to use my username because this is a guy that is going to perform the import job. And then under password, this is where you copy the auth token that we had created earlier, okay? Did I copy mine? Let me see. I don't think I copied it. Let me just see that. Just give me 1 second. Just 1 second. Yes, I managed to find my auth token. So what I do is I just copy that token and I paste it here. Remember to have it in between the quotes, very important. Okay, and then I just click on that to create the credential. Okay. So the credential, okay, so yeah, I had lost connectivity and then it has reconnected, and you can see that the credential has been created here. Okay, with the credential created, I can now go back to my import job wizard. I right click on that and then just click on data pump import wizard. Okay, so I need to confirm, yes. So we just have to give in, you'll notice that in the import wizard, if you've ever done data pump jobs, run export import, these are some of the things that you'll be very familiar with. So all I need to do here is to offer an import job name. So maybe let me just call it test import. And then you can choose to import your data or DDL or both, okay? And then depending on how you did your export, you can either do a full import or a full or a schema import. I did a schema export, so I'll pick on schemas, okay? And then what I do is under choose input files, the first thing you'll notice here is credentials or directories, okay? So what I do here is to pick on the credential that I created. Remember, we just created a credential called ADW credential, and this is where our auth token acted as the password, okay? So I click on that credential, and then remember the pre-authentication URL that we copied elsewhere in the OCI page. So what we do is we copy that URL that we had pasted somewhere in our notepad, and that is what we actually paste here. So it's asking for a URI. This is the URI that, using the credential that we just gave, will direct us to the dump file in the OCI bucket. So I just paste that there, and then I click on next. Now, if you've done everything correctly, then you should be able to see the schemas loading and available source schemas. And this is what you are going to be putting into selected source schemas. If nothing loads here and it keeps staying at waiting, then it means that there is a problem. Could be your credentials, or maybe your pre-authenticated request, may have expired. In my case, everything looks to be good, and we have the HR schema. This is what will be loading into the autonomous database. So I just drag that over, and then I click on next. If I need to remap my schemas or table spaces, then I can do that. For this purpose, I don't need to do that. So I just click on next. And then you have things here to do with threading. You can choose to parallelize your operation if you want to. You can choose where your logs are going to be. I'm going to leave this as the default, and then just click on next. You can choose to run this job either immediately or you run it later. You could schedule it, but in this case, I'm going to run my job immediately. So just click on next. Here you have a summary of what you just picked. I'm loading data into SQLDB with that schemas and the options that I just picked in my wizard. With that done, all I need to do is to click on finish, and the job is running, okay? So this is a small table. It won't take long. And just like that, your job has been run. You can see some details here, the parallel degree that you had picked, the data pump session. And down here, you'll be able to see that your jobs have been run. So the PL SQL procedure successfully completed. The owner of the job is admin, and this was the name of the import job that we are running. So take a note of this name. This is what we are going to be looking for on OCI. When we look at the logs. So we have test imp, okay? And at the bottom here, you can see that the import job succeeded. So you may be wondering, how will I be able to see my logs? So for that, let's go back to the OCI console. We are back on the OCI console. And what I need to do is to go back to my autonomous database, okay? I just click on that, click on my autonomous database here. And then what I do is I pick on my database, SQLD, and then I click on database actions. And this time, let me not click on data load. Let me click on view all database actions. This is where you find most DB admin jobs and tasks. So things that you'll need to monitor and administer your database. And then under administration, I scroll down and I see data pump. So what I need to do is to just click on data pump. And you can see that one job has been run on this database. None failed, none is executing. So everything executed correctly. Let me just refresh this to see the job that I'm talking about. Remember, this is the name that we just saw on SQL Developer. I had named my job test imp. If you can recall, the SD here is just to show you that this import job has been run from SQL Developer. And to view our logs, all I need to do is to click on these three buttons and click on View Logs. Okay? Under View Logs, you'll be able to see the logs, which I'm sure you will be familiar with if you've run data pump jobs. So you can see the master table was loaded successfully, and you have the import logs here showing you the number of rows for each table. And at the end here, you can see that this job was run successfully. So that's it. That is basically how you load data into an autonomous database using SQL Developer. I hope you enjoyed the demo, and thank you very much for your attention. Bye-bye.
Okay, so you have seen now a demo how to import a dump file that you first need to export from the source database and then upload to the object storage, and from there import with the SQL Developer import wizard. But I will show you now a tool that does everything of that fully end-to-end automated, and it's called OCI Database Migration, or DMS. And DMS is a fully managed cloud service in OCI. It's free, so you can start and run migrations for 6 months. And it also supports offline and online migrations. And I will show you in a minute how to configure an online migration. Now, the important thing is OCI Database Migration, you can think of it more like an orchestration tool. So this is not a new way how to migrate database or a new technology. OCI Database Migration uses existing tools like Data Pump and Golden Gate to actually execute the migration. And it also uses a tool called Zero Downtime Migration. Maybe you have heard that before. Zero Downtime Migration is actually the engine that does the actual migration, like logging into the source system, running the export, uploading everything to the object storage. And you can also download the zero downtime migration as a software and install it on a server, and then configure and run it manually. But OCI Database Migration is basically the fully managed ZDM service running in OCI. And how does it work? So we have our source databases, and then we have OCI Database Migration that connects to the source database and extracts the data, uploads it to object storage, and then imports the data. And the nice thing with OCI Database Migration, it also has CPAD, the tool that I've shown you before that scans the source database. It has CPAD included and integrated. I will also show you that in a minute. And then if we decide to go with an offline migration, DMS uses data bump. We can choose to go with database link or with OCI object storage and do the import. And if we do an online migration, we also use Golden Gate then on top of that data bump import. And of course we support autonomous database, but you can use DMS also to migrate to other database cloud services. So what versions and what platforms do we support with DMS? We basically support all sources from 11G up to 21C, so it's 11204. And we support all Linux servers, AIX, Solaris, and also Amazon RDS. Windows is currently not supported as a source platform. So let's jump over now to DMS. And because of the short time we have today, we cannot do a full migration, but I have prepared a few things that I will show you a little bit around in DMS right now. So you can find DMS when you click on this menu button here and then go to migration and disaster recovery, and here is database migration. And then you end up at the start screen here, which provides lots of useful information. There are live labs and other useful links. And the first thing you need to do when you want to do a migration is you need to define your database connections. So to tell DMS how to connect to your source database and how to connect to your target database. Now, I already have pre-created a few connections here, but normally you would go to create connection. You give it a name and a compartment, and then you need to specify a vault here. And this is something that needs created up front. So we need to have a vault because all the passwords for the connecting users we enter in DMS are stored encrypted in this vault here. And then you can basically manually configure your database. For example, if you have an on-prem database, you need to specify the host, the port, and the service name. But in our case, let's say we have an autonomous database, we can directly choose we want to configure a connection to an autonomous database, and it already has my database here connected. I also can choose to create a private endpoint if I'm in a private subnet. And as a next thing, I just need to enter username and password to tell DMS how to connect to the database. Okay, so you need to do that for all your sources and your targets. In my case, I already have created one for my source PDB, also for my source CDB. That is needed if you are doing an online migration. So in an online migration, you also need to have to connect to the CDB. And of course, my ADB target. And then we can basically go to migrations and we click on create migration. Again, give it a name and specify a compartment. Here we can specify if we can have a direct connection to the source database. If it's not possible and we need to have a server as a bridge in between, we basically need to run an agent on that server, but it's also possible. And again, we need to specify our vault to store the passwords encrypted. And then I choose my source database. And I say this is a pluggable database. Then I also need to specify my container database. And as a target database, I choose my autonomous database here. Click on next. And here we can specify how to do the initial load. We can use database links or we can go via object storage. For database links, we usually recommend only small databases because there are some limitations when it comes to parallelism. So we only recommend this for databases up to 100 gigabytes. So for larger databases, we should go with object storage. And in that case, we also need to specify a directory name and a directory path. That also needs to be pre-created in the source database upfront. And then we also need to specify a bucket, the object storage bucket. This also needs to be pre-created upfront. So DMS needs to upload the export to that bucket. And then we can also specify some additional parameters. For example, we can use exclude or include clauses. So if we just want to migrate a specific schema, for example, we can just say include and specify the schema name here. And we can also set a few additional parameters. If you're familiar with data bumps, you will probably recognize a few of them. So for example, how many processes we want to run the export in parallel on the source and on the target. But it's also fine to go with the default because by default, DMS already sets these to the recommended values. And basically you create your migration then, and this would be for an offline migration. So we just do the export, we upload it to object storage, and then we do the import into autonomous database. But we also can use DMS to run online migrations. And in that case, I need to check this here to say use online replication. And then I need to specify a few more parameters here, like Golden Gate hub and Golden Gate admin user and password. Now for that, we need a Golden Gate installation up and running, and you don't have to be a Golden Gate expert or administrator to configure Golden Gate manually. What we have provided is an image in the marketplace. So if you go here in the menu and choose marketplace, and then you search for Golden Gate, there is one image called Oracle Golden Gate Database Migrations image. I click on that one here. And you see this image is also free for 6 months. So you don't have to pay any license for Golden Gate for these kind of migrations. And you basically, this is an OCI resource manager script, a terraform script. You basically launch the stack. It just asks you for a few parameters like which network, the subnet and the server name and things like that. But with a few clicks, in a few minutes, you have a Golden Gate instance up and running that is fully configured. And also the deployment process gives you an URL at the end that you can just paste directly into this field here. And then you just need to specify the username and the password. And then we also need to specify Golden Gate users and passwords for the source and the target database, because we also need to create users in the source and target database. So we have a user that Golden Gate can connect to the databases. And basically that's it for the online migration. So what DMS does is it then connects to that Golden Gate instance, and during setup of the migration, it configures the replicate and the extract processes. I click on cancel now. So what I've prepared here is when you create your first migration, you basically end up in that state here. You have a migration that is active, and you also can change all of the parameters that you have specified during the creation of the migration. So it's no problem. You can change everything afterwards. What's also nice is you can clone an existing migration. So if you need to rerun a migration, or you need to change a few things, or maybe change the target, you can just clone it. And the first thing we would run now is a validate. And what a validate does is it basically runs through some checks. So we are checking, can we connect to the source database? Can we connect to the target database? Can we upload to the object storage? Is Golden Gate available? And I have prepared another migration here in a different state where I already executed the validate. And you see we have two jobs running here. The first job I ran went to the failed state, and I want to show you why. So these are the phases that we run during the validate. As I said, we are checking a few things. And here you see the integration of the CPAD tool, the Cloud Pre-Migration Advisor tool. And in that case, it failed because I manipulated the source database, so we can see CPAD failing here. Let's click on here. And now you have a nice overview of all the checks that Seabird run on the source database. You can also select here the past one. So you get an overview of all the checks that have been run on the source database. And you see we have a check here with result action required, which is basically the same that I have shown you before in the presentation part about that table where I created that ORD image data type. And again, it says this is not or cannot be used in autonomous database. Now, the really nice thing here in DMS is I can directly click on that object here and I can say exclude it from my migration, and then it will be added to the exclude list, which is a really nice feature. Okay, so in my case, I have cleaned up my database then and run the validate again. So you see the second time it succeeded and all the different phases of the checks were completed successfully. And after the validate was successful, you can then start the migration. And when you start the migration, we also run through different phases. So we have one phase for the export, we have one phase for the upload to the object storage, then again for the import to set up the golden gate, and lots of different phases. And you can basically pause at any of the specific phases. So if you want to execute something manually in between a phase, you can pause between those phases. But when you do an online migration, what you want to do is you definitely want to pause at that phase here, monitor replication lag. And you see it's already selected by default because we are doing an online migration. So what that means is at that point, we are keeping the source and the target database in sync. So Golden Gate is already set up. Every DML we run on the source database is replicated on the target database, and we end up with two databases completely in sync. And then when you start your maintenance window, you just stop the application and you continue that migration to run the final switchover. So that will take a few minutes, and that's the duration, the maximum duration of downtime you have in your maintenance window. And then finally you can start the application again. And I also have one migration where I run through all the phases. You see my migration was succeeded. Here you see all the different phases we run through. And finally, what you also can do in DMS, you can click here and download the export or the import log and directly have a look at the data pump log files to see what was going on through the export and the import. Okay, that was a short overview of DMS. Let me jump back. So that also brings us to the end of today's presentation. Thank you for joining today's session. If you want to learn more, you also have some links here. Again, the cloud migration webpage that has lots of useful information. But also we have a GitHub page for our EMEA specialist data platform Modernise team, where you also find lots of additional information and also videos. Okay, with that, back to Maria.
Great, wonderful. Thank you again, everyone, for attending and for all your great questions. And thanks so much, Amanraj, Marcus, and Austine. So we're wrapping it up then, and feel free to drop the webinar as you like. Thank you, and we hope to see you next time. Take care.